Welcome back to another episode of Film and Impact, where we connect with indie filmmakers from around the world who are using documentary to move the needle. I'm your host, Zephyrin Roy, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with an indie filmmaker who's originally from Colombia and who's currently based in Mexico City. She's a director, DP, and producer whose work has been featured on prominent media like The Atlantic, The Washington Post, The Intercept, Al Jazeera, PBS, and the BBC. And her short film, Lupita, premiered this year at the Sheffield Doc Fest and will soon launch on the Guardian Documentary channel. So today we're going to be talking about getting work distributed in prominent media, the importance of building a network, and navigating the intersection between journalism and filmmaking. I'm really excited that she decided to join us today, and I know that a lot of filmmakers, we're going to be talking about things that a lot of filmmakers will be interested in hearing. So let's welcome Monica Wise Robles to Film and Impact. Monica, thank you so much for being with me today on Film and Impact. I'm really happy to have you. Thank you for accepting to come on today and talk with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, for real. I want to start by talking a bit about how you became a filmmaker, because you're also a journalist, and I'm really interested in talking with you about how you navigate like the intersection between journalism and filmmaking. But maybe before you get into that, you can just tell me a bit about your journey of how you actually became a filmmaker.
Well, I can start by telling you a little bit about my background.
Yes.
So my mom's Colombian, so I'm gringa Latina. I grew up in California, but I've always kind of been between worlds. I grew up a lot, or I spent a lot of time in Latin America growing up with my family there too. So I think kind of being in between two worlds shaped a lot of the work I do. And never quite, fitting in, ni de aquí, ni de allá. But obviously I always had the privilege of a U.S. passport and everything that comes along with that. So it shaped my understanding of injustice, and I always wanted to work hands-on and travel.
Yeah.
And so it worked out well when I started making films. And then when I was in college, I studied abroad in Chile and Cuba, and I actually did my first film in southern Chile with a Mapuche community. And I forgot about that until I was going through my Vimeo the other day. And my girlfriend was like, you should really use that in your speech. And I was like, yeah, I guess I've always been interested in Native stories, right? Especially in South America. So.
And what year, that was when? Like how far ago was that?
I was probably 20, and I'd made a documentary in college, and I was like, this is so much work, so much goes into even an hour of putting together footage. And I went to Chile, and I was like, I'm going to learn traditional medicine from Native communities, super hippie.
Wow.
And I ended up just documenting a bunch of stories from different healers and youth there. So then I was like, I guess this is what I gravitate towards,
Yeah.
So I ended up graduating with a focus in Latin American studies and filmmaking, and I didn't really think I would make a career out of that. And I started working for Skylight Pictures in New York that focuses on human rights stories, filmmaking in Brooklyn, and mostly in Guatemala and Latin America. So that was a good fit, and I learned a lot from there. And then I worked on TV docs for MSNBC, PBS, and just kind of got my hands dirty doing a little bit of everything. And then I came to Mexico 3-4 years ago, I think a little bit earlier, to do a journalism workshop. And then I just kind of decided I wanted to start working in this region, and I started pitching short videos and started doing video journalism, and I've had a lot of luck because Mexico has been full of great opportunities for me. Wow. But I know that it's not the same for everyone, especially local filmmakers and journalists, so I try to make local bridges that makes sense. With every production that I have that control.
Oh, nice. I would love to talk with you about the local scene in terms of documentary filmmaking, where you are. But just before that, you spoke about journalism and filmmaking at the same time. So were you doing them conjointly, or did you start off in journalism and then it sort of flowed into filmmaking like very naturally? Like your video journalism.
Yeah, I guess a good example is I was working for a production company, another one in Brooklyn, right before I left to Mexico, and I was working as an AP, so putting out a million fires at once. But I also got to meet and interview very cool people. But that's when Standing Rock was going on, and I already filmed a leader there, and I got called back from an old boss to be like, do you want to produce something for Telesur? So I think I was like able to I quit. I was able to take a week off, and I went and last minute produced a bunch of stories with an amazing Lakota woman. And then kind of from there, I think I decided to just go stay with a friend in Mexico and then start pitching local stories here.
Nice. And
I think I just wanted more control. I wanted something that I can do from start to finish that was more doable, and then video journalism is just a lot faster, even though there's a lot of rejection in that, but you can turn things out quicker, you know?
Yeah, a lot of rejection in documentary
In
filmmaking too. Yeah.
But 90%.
Maybe in documentary filmmaking, you're more like, well, I can still do whatever I want. You know, I'll just make this documentary even if nobody wants to look at it.
Right, with my own money.
Yes, exactly. So was like when you got the job with Telesur, was this like your first sort of like big gig? Yeah.
That was my first gig producing a piece for web or online news source, right?
Yeah.
Because before I was just like a small part, like an assistant, well, an important part, but a small part in a bigger team, which was like a TV documentary team, right?
Yeah. And since then, like...
But a lot of documentaries kind of like were on the line of also journalism and film, because like
Yes.
some have a host, like Maria Hinojosa, who I used to work for. So it's kind of in the middle of the two.
Yeah, intermingled, yeah. And since then, you've worked with a lot of big media houses. Like you've worked for the BBC, and your work is on Al Jazeera and the Intercept and the Washington Post and like so many others. What was it like getting your work onto these, this media? I know for a lot of like emerging filmmakers or filmmakers starting off, for example, this might seem like an unreachable or, very a goal that's difficult to attain. Like, how did you achieve that? And what was it like for you? Maybe getting that first call or...
Good question. I think I owe a lot to the community of female journalists here. I kind of just stalked my like 3 favorite female journalists. There weren't very many when I moved here.
Yeah.
And I knew a few already. And so I would just ask them for tips. And eventually one of them made this big WhatsApp group, kind of like Brown Girls, actually. And now there's like 60 of us. And every time someone's like, I can't place this story, or like someone's giving me this rate, is this real? And so I think just like having those contacts and sharing and helping each other out.
Yeah.
That I owe a lot to that, but also it was like I have a huge spreadsheet of different editors. So there was like one summer where I probably pitched one story to over, 40 publications.
Wow.
And I ended up making a good doc out of it. So
Yeah.
It wasn't easy either. It's a lot of persistence and trying to figure out what people want. And then sometimes it's just right place, right time. Like my first piece for The Guardian was during a IWMF, International Women Media Foundation, who's definitely supported my career a lot, a fellowship in El Salvador. And I had saw that the International channel was focusing a lot on abortion rights and the fight there. And then so I heard there was a demonstration, and I pitched it to one of the main editors, and I got picked up right away. So it's kind of seeing what people are looking for, right place, right time, and then someone passing you the right contact.
Yeah, which is why it's really important to have or to build a network. I think one of the things that we do when we start off as filmmakers is we sometimes feel isolated, especially depending on where we're situated. For example, for filmmakers in the Caribbean, because the industry is not very developed, then you can feel isolated, or even in countries in Latin America. But it's really important, even online, to develop this network that serves as a support system also, because contrary to what we believe when we don't know people yet in the industry, people are very open to helping and to collaborating and to sharing information about work, resources, and so on. So it's definitely something that you create and that you can tap into, on the journey. So that's super important. And you said something else which was really important, is creating those resources. So you have like your spreadsheet where you've listed the names of editors. Yeah.
People, and I'm like, update it, please. It's been 2 years.
Yeah. So you have like this database. So you know that when you have something, you can like shoot it out to like a certain number of people. And even if like one person responds, then you have one positive response from 40 people, maybe, or 100 people on this spreadsheet. So like you definitely have to do the work and keep, being persistent.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, coming back to that question from before, about the documentary scene, like where you are right now.
I don't know, I still...
Or maybe remind us where you are also.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm based in Mexico, in Mexico City.
Yeah.
I've been here for over 3 years now. And I'm actually, I feel like I'm just starting to make more of a community here with local filmmakers from the main film schools, which are pretty tight-knit, actually, with some outsider foreign filmmaker journalists. And we're doing that under the Video Consortium. We just made the first chapter here in Mexico. So that's been exciting. We showed my film for our first meeting, and Lupita, the protagonist, and the local producer were able to zoom in from the highlands.
Oh, nice.
From the future, and really cool that they were able to interact with all my colleagues, right?
Yeah. So it's quite vibrant, the community.
Definitely. And I think what's one of my references, or something that I admire in independent documentaries here, is that it doesn't feel like it needs to be crafted as much for like a general audience or that obvious. It's like there's a lot, I wouldn't say all of them, that's for sure, but they kind of give you the benefit of the doubt that if you don't know enough about the story, you'll go and check after. And it's just kind of like letting you into this world very, what's the word, like, observational, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a slower tempo. So I kind of, that was helpful for me to see that there's a different way to make, it's more maybe an ethnographic type documentary here. And I don't think that Lupita is an example of that, but it's definitely, if I make a longer piece or for my next films, it's definitely something that I have in mind as far as the style.
Yeah. So they don't tell you everything, or necessarily even what to think. You don't necessarily have a guiding voice, or you have like a slice of something that's happening right at that moment, this story that you're observing. I think that's wonderful.
I think that's especially for like a young generation of filmmakers here. A lot of them are coming out of the CCC, but there's other examples. There are obviously a lot of mainstream productions here. There's a lot of Netflix productions here, but I'm talking about like a independent documentary bubble that I.
Yeah, a different way of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke about Lupita. I know you've done films on topics like migration and women and human rights. What drives you to tell stories like Lupita and another story another film I've seen of yours, which is La Caravanas?
Mm-hmm.
What drives you to tell these stories, and what is the experience like also?
Well, those two had pretty different approaches. Lupita, I found her, I was actually trying to pitch a story on Marichui, who was the first woman to run for campaign for presidency in Mexico back in the fall of 2017. And I saw Lupita there as one of the maybe 300 councilwomen from different tribes all around Mexico. And I was just really impacted by the way she spoke. She obviously is an incredible orator. And like that strength and like the weight of her history, of her family and her community and everything made me like, I have to figure out how to get closer. I have to figure out how to share this story with more people. I feel like she was really like the spokeswoman for that history that's all over the region, all over the world, really.
Yeah.
So I was drawn to her just because she's so impressive on stage. And then I really wanted to know, I knew about like Zapatismo and the movement from college, but I wanted to know what was behind that spectacle, right? And I felt like this intersection of like women to the front and Lupita's personal story with the background of this like sexy mass movement. There was definitely something there to try to get closer to. And it was a process, but in the end, the collaboration worked, and we all convinced her that she should share her story with more than just an interview. And now she's totally behind it. So it's exciting.
So now you've finished this film, and it has been featured at the Sheffield Doc Fest, and there's another. It's coming out online also. And you have in the Guardian, right? And you have an impact campaign that's upcoming for this film. Tell me a little bit about La Caravanas, because I think that this story is it's quite how would I say that? It's unbelievable, this story of a wave of migration, this caravan of persons coming from Honduras. You just have like thousands of people literally walking across countries trying to get to the United States, and they're driven by faith that when they get to the border, the police, the federal police, will let them pass. When there is no assurance that this is going to happen. These are single women traveling with babies, families, people creating new families as they make the journey together, people who've lost family members. It's just people with incredible stories who bond together, and they're trying to get somewhere to make a better life for themselves. And as you're on this road telling the story, I can only imagine that it must have been a powerful experience at times to share and to partake in their life at that moment. So what was the experience like for you as a person or as a filmmaker telling that story?
It was difficult because of the circumstances. It was very last minute. We thought I wasn't sure which airport to fly into because they were moving quickly. We thought we had like lost the story. The Guardian gave me like the green light like the night before I was supposed to take off and get there. Put together a team of a driver and a local producer last minute, and it's hard because you're just parachuting in, asking these people who are sleeping on the street. Obviously, it's such a hard condition, so hot, and it was like I think my viewfinder broke the first day because of the humidity and the rain and everything. And it's just so uncomfortable to go up to people and be like, do you want to share your story with me? Obviously. But then we got really lucky. And I think the next morning, the second morning, we left at 3, 4 in the morning. And this family who was run by the woman, Fanny, who's the main character, which is actually a family of friends. They're not, she only has 2 daughters there with her. And it was just, they were having a party. And it was great that I was able to film them at the beginning when there was still so much hope and capture that spirit. Because as you know, the further people went north, the more people started to return home.
Yeah.
And we filmed the first main blockade that I know of on the border of Chiapas and Oaxaca, and the police weren't going to let them through, and then they were able to get through, and Fanny and her crew walked up to us in the last scene, and I was like, wow, thanks, God. This is great. In 4 days, we were able to make a full circle, but we definitely got lucky for that one. And then it was a rush. It was like a week of editing together. My editor, Maria Hinojosa, did a great job. I was just like trying to pull selects, and he was like, okay, I think I have an idea here, because it's just like, you've met so many footage, people, there's so many angles. How do you tie it together, right?
Yeah.
But for those pieces too, you can use voiceover, which helps a lot too. Yeah.
So it was
jumping into a very, very intense situation. Lots of different.
Yeah, because when you get to the end and you see the federal police, for example, who's there at the border, and they say, no, we're not letting the people pass, and then you have the human rights organization who's like advocating for the migrants. You being there as a filmmaker, how do you navigate the situation? Because you might feel empathy for the people, who sharing their stories with you. There's a potentially dangerous situation because then you have the police. Really anything can happen. The police might, they might charge, or they might use violent force to push back the crowd. The crowd might charge. You probably want the best to happen for the people, but at the same time you want to keep distance to be able to document the story. What's it like navigating this experience between being part of the story and being an observer and having some distance?
Well, I can tell you how it played out to get some context, because I don't know if I was thinking all those things in the moment. But we had found a crew of punk boys from Honduras, from the coast, who were really cool, had a lot of attitude, but they're like, fine, you can film us. Those were
the 3 guys. The 3 guys that I see somewhere in the movie.
Yeah, by the tree. They're great. And then we're like, okay, can we find you in a few hours? Because they were going to leave at 1 or 2 in the morning. So we basically had we went back to the hotel, got our stuff, which was in a different beach town, tiny, and came back. So we took a nap, came back, and it was 4 in the morning, 3, 4 in the morning, everyone started to get out. We were filming them, and then of course they disappear. So we're like, okay, what do? We heard that there's a retén or a stop further up. Maybe we can drive up and see there and wait for everyone there. So basically, we were the first people. There was one other Al Jazeera journalist, but we're the first people. I was with some local journalists too. Everyone who could fit in my car, basically, we were all together. And so we were trying to let everyone know, the human rights organizations, any migrants, we were there basically this is going to happen. It might get out of hand. We don't know, but we didn't have signal.
Yeah.
So some people were standing on the side of the road trying to file, or trying to tell their editors they could be in trouble. Of course, mine was in London asleep probably, or no, he was in New York. That's why he wasn't mine. But Jimena, the woman who works with the local periodistas de a pie, she was trying to get on a group chat with the little service she had so they can monitor it.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we just waited there for a while. We were filming. Somehow I was able to get the drone shots and do the camera at the same time, thanks to my assistant. And kind of just lucked out. It was a very small space because it was like right before you go on the bridge, so it was kind of hard to get out of there too. We were stuck between the police. The police gave an official statement. And then all of a sudden, magically, they decided they came to agreement and they decided to open the border. So that was a very exciting moment, especially on like an hour and a half of sleep for everyone. And then I just kept going. I kept filming, and we had no idea, no service still. We had no idea where the driver was. So I was like hitchhiking back with my friend trying to find him. And then we were like, okay, I think that's a wrap. Like 10 hours later. But it was a very emotional moment. Everyone was celebrating when they were going over them. Like I said, we found Fanny and her crew, the main characters, and it was a really sweet way to end it, but that didn't last long. You know, a lot of them ended up going home, so.
Yeah. The moment at the end when they do cross is... It is a bittersweet moment because they're so happy. You know, she's talking about being the lucky family.
Like if you only knew.
Yes, and that, you know, she knew that they were going to pass, that they were going to cross over, and you can tell like there's a form of relief, but you know also that this is not going to last. It's just one leg of the journey, and it's not going to turn out very positively for everyone.
So. Exactly. No, that spirit and that excitement and that, I guess, like positivity was probably short-lived. So it is special that I was able to capture that and share that in the moment.
Yeah, I think
But I think we also gravitated towards the people that were the most open and most into being on camera and being the characters and everything.
Yeah, they were full of life and joy and enthusiasm and joie de vivre. That group. I think it's very poignant when you tell stories as filmmakers, and you know that. You know, very often the stories that you tell, they're just real life stories. They don't necessarily turn out, you know, in the way that you would want. There's not necessarily the happy ending, but you have to tell the story because the story, for different reasons, the story for you just might deserve to be told and to be seen. But in situations like this, for example, you're raising awareness about something. Having this story seen elsewhere is possibly impacting these people's lives positively. So even if as a person, like immediately, you know, you're just seeing filming and you're not necessarily doing something that immediately impacts them, but in you know, in the long run, it might have a positive impact, and it's important that those stories be seen. Definitely.
Yeah. I hope it's hard because the ideas are so from one extreme to the other, especially the comments on the Guardian. Some were so awful, but I hope that it has like can have a small impact in changing the minds or changing like the dominant narrative in certain communities about that, like migrants just come to take our jobs and have another problem, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's also pretty eye-opening to see so many hateful comments once you... My rule of thumb is to let someone else read it first, and then I'm like, okay, I'll check them out. But, you know, it's not a personal... But some of them were like, of course the Guardian shows a family and not, like... the real
not the bad migrants.
Exactly.
Not the troublemaking, job stealing migrants.
Exactly.
And I think what people don't realize, because when you're in your country and your situation is maybe not even necessarily comfortable, but you have some form of stability, and you know you're not threatened by by losing your livelihood or your life. maybe not even your livelihood, because maybe you might be threatened by losing your livelihood because you could lose your job any day, but you're not threatened by, losing your life. You don't have necessarily like a dangerous gang or, a dictator or, guerrillas threatening to take your life. Then you're in a more comfortable position to say, don't come and stay out. But what people don't realize is if your situation in your home is stable, people don't leave their homes. Like nobody wants to leave their home.
3 small children by themselves.
Yes, you don't want to push like a baby stroller across, like a country to get to another country just because like you want to. That this is just
maybe I'll make more money there. No.
Yeah, no. You'll wait it out, wait for another opportunity where you can probably get a ride all the way.
Exactly.
Yeah. But
kind of easier. Yeah, and on another reporting trip, I met a big Garifuna family coming from Honduras, and it was their second trying to get over the border in also in Chiapas in southern Mexico, and we like embedded with the local human rights, the local, what's it called? Like the refuge or the migrant camp.
Yeah.
And we told them there's a family hiding out from Border Patrol basically. And so I got in the back and basically filmed them jumping in, and they trusted us because we'd come talk to them earlier, and they said this is the only way to get past that next checkpoint. So it was like very much a moment of like make or break it. And they had a bunch of kids too. And they had already tried once and gotten turned back, and they said one of their sons had been killed, their house had been set on fire, and it's just like very dire circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's changing.
In telling all the stories, like what has been the craziest thing that has happened to you telling the stories and making films?
Craziest thing. Well, that one was pretty crazy, like jumping in a truck and telling the whole family to get in too, and I hid behind in the bushes because if I do the wrong thing, I put their lives in jeopardy. It's like you're not messing around. And obviously, like there is a line of how much to intervene, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that if someone's life is in danger and you have access to someone that provides these resources that's waiting on the lookout, that's your moral duty to do that. So good thing my team was on the same page. Can't just leave them there, especially because they were saying the road, there's like a big dump yard, and they said it's super dangerous. People get killed there.
Yeah. That is a delicate balance.
Like in the back of the truck, filming basically, trying to get to safety because the guy wasn't going to slow down. He knew their futures were in danger. Basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that is definitely a delicate balance that you have to have as filmmakers, regardless of the story you're telling, as long as you're entering into somebody else's life, you have this awareness that you are having an impact on the person's life. And we have to be very, very aware of how we're impacting the person's life, whether the situation is, life-threatening or not, whether the person's life is in danger or, it's just like ordinary day-to-day life situations. People, they're going to adjust their life to include us. Even if it's minimally, we have to be aware of how we're influencing them and how this can actually impact their life and possibly their future.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also the difference, especially in documentary filmmaking, the difference of having a collaborator that you're filming or a subject.
Yeah.
If I'm asking Lupita for a day of her time filming her around the house, I know I can't pay her, but I need at least to give her money for groceries, a light bill, something. We threw a birthday party for her, and I had mariachis, which is something that she would never, no one's ever gotten for her, you know what I mean? But even the little things, you have to give back. If I'm trying to get a shot of her cooking something, it's I need to give her something in return, right? You can't just be like, oh, okay, you agreed to this. I'm just gonna take this material, right? No, I think that's also a new dialogue in documentary filmmaking, how to work with the communities you film with and not leave them without anything. And not only can the film needs to be a tool to share their message, but also all the time they give in making it needs to be somehow compensated. Right?
Yeah. I think that it's, how would I say that? Some filmmakers are for this sort of sharing approach, and some are more, some advocate for an approach that's more strictly observational. You know, I observe really from the outside, sort of like this ethnographic approach, and I don't necessarily share in the subject's experience, and I leave the environment as I met it in a certain way. I'm not sure just to what point this is actually possible, because I do think that just you being in the environment, you necessarily have an impact because of you're looking in, you're observing, and that changes the equation. It changes the chemistry of what's going on for sure. And then there's the other approach, as you say, where you're collaborating with the persons that you're filming. It's not strictly observational, where you're outside looking in. You're asking something from them, so you're saying, hey, I would like something from you. I'm also giving something back. So when I leave, this person came here and I gave her something, and she also left something with me, So it's more of an exchange. Yeah, that helps to build, I think, relationships also between the filmmaker and the subject, but also between individuals, between people who share like a human connection.
Exactly. And frankly, Lupita I wouldn't have been able to make it without this kind of trust that's always in process, and collaboration, because it's not just the access, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a community in the highlands. So I slept on the floor there. They gave me like tostadas and beans. They would let me know sometimes too late if there was like a security issue nearby with the neighbors. It's like, I can't just like show up and be like, what can I film? It's like, okay, what's going on today? I'll wait another few hours. Okay, great. We can film the cemetery. Let's go. It's really stepping into another world. And I think I mentioned this, but a lot of the scenes that we shot in her community, Actial, were like Lupita's or Lalo's ideas. Like some ended up outtakes, but Lalo's the local producer. But like the creek where she ran to safety after the massacre, she did her testimony there. The shots in the church, and most of all the shots with the photos of her mom and dad with the kids. Well, I got there one day, and her and the leader of the community went to like their little closet, and they got the photos out. I had no idea what's going on. I'll be like, okay, I'll just be here. Let me know. And also, everyone has to know everything, so everyone has to approve. So the access wasn't easy, and they've had even Lupita in the last Q&A said they've had bad experiences with other
outsiders,
journalists, filmmakers, exactly. Yeah, which makes it. I mean, it happens in every community, but especially with them, I think. So yeah, it was a long process of building trust and communication from very different worlds, but also it wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have someone from the community on board from the beginning, which was Eduardo.
And that trust is what brings you to this sweet spot that you want to get to when you're making a film, where the person that you're filming, your collaborator, they become aware of the story that you want to tell, or they become aware of certain things that would just make the story good. And it's not far-fetched things, it's things that they would do normally, but they're going to choose at that moment to do it. So for example, going to get like the the family photos and, creating these moments that just, with like the perfect chemistry, and that just brings everything together. It's really a nice sweet spot that you get through like trust, I think, when they feel this connection with you, and then they want to give even more of themselves and of their story. It's beautiful.
Exactly. And it's especially rewarding when it hasn't always been that easy. I mean, there was one time I came with a crew, and they said the neighbors, after the fact, they were like, the neighbors said that they were going to shoot down the drone, and I don't think you asked the right committee for access, or we like signed something, but it was like with the wrong president, and so all of a sudden they had all these excuses, and we had to leave, and I had to come back with just a sound mixer like a few weeks later.
Oh wow!
And that was hard because Lalo, the local producer, was stuck in the middle of his community telling him he did something wrong, which is the hardest position to be in, and also us being like, why didn't you tell us that there was something to be worried about, right? So I think it was overall miscommunication and some people in the organization trying to keep their power last minute. So it's not easy. But I also understand if it was a security concern, I should have known that from the beginning, and that's something that I would never want to be responsible for, obviously, and that's why I was so heartbroken after that happened. But anyways, we resolved it, but that was definitely one of the setbacks in the production process.
A hiccup solved.
It's not as easy as it sounds, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I can just imagine.
Made it work.
I can just imagine filming up in the Highlands when it's not easy access, both I think topographically, geographically, and also just gaining access to the community, having to pass through all the committees, etc., getting authorizations from everyone, from all the right people, and then having to leave and come back like several weeks later. Those are the alias of indie filmmaking and working with people in real life situations, because I mean, you're impacting their lives. So if they say get out, you gotta get out,
Or make sure Lupita still doesn't hate me.
Exactly, because you might never be able to come back. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it was tricky. And also, they speak, even Lupita, between the two of them, they're speaking in Sosi the whole time. So I'm like,
so you have no idea what's going on.
No idea. I'm like, just an exercise in patience. This is what I signed up for. And then but he was always translating for me too, which was great. But so all of the reunions would be like an extra hour because of the translation and the formality.
And what are you?
Also,
yes.
What? No, it's just. I mean, I grew up speaking Spanish, but I'm like English is my first language too. So it was like three levels of interpretation, basically. Sometimes when I couldn't get the right words out.
Yeah. So what are you working on right now? Do you have any projects in the pipeline? Anything that's due to come out? I know there's COVID, so that must have impacted your work, your process.
Right now I'm finishing an edit for a BBC Reel piece. It's pretty fun. It's a break from human rights work. It's about using technology in the Maya Biosphere Reserve. So I got to hang out with archaeologists there for like a week last year. And I think because of COVID, I was able to be like, hey, how's this going? And they hadn't edited it yet, so they asked me to edit, so I got to put it together. So I'm finishing that. And then I have another long-term project in Guatemala, which I also started in 2017. And that's about 41 girls who were killed in a state-run home in Guatemala in 2017 on International Women's Day. And it's a complicated story because it has a lot of antecedentes or reports of abuse to the girls. They're girls who went away from home, obviously from those socioeconomic backgrounds. And so it's just kind of the story about how women are not respected both in the legal system and in the educational childcare system. And it's kind of the story of generational trauma through this huge event. And I'm trying to make it, me and my co-director Victoria are trying to make it, which is very hard, but not re-victimize the families or the girls, and focusing more about what's it like to be a teenage girl after surviving all this, and different. They're so spunky, like what's so interesting about each of them, and giving a little bit of context to what happened in the history of Guatemala through that. So it's a hard story to tell, obviously. Still waiting on more funding, but I've been going back to editing it a bit too, focusing on the testimonies and the quiet moments we have with the girls and their family, which we've been collecting for a long time. So I'm hoping to get something out. We published something in local media, in Nómada, a great independent news site in Guatemala, on the 3rd anniversary last March 8th. And then hoping by this year we'll get the Doc series out by then.
So it's going to be a series, or is it going to be a film? Do you know yet?
We don't know. We're hoping it's going to be one medium feature length or feature length film. It could be a series.
Okay.
It could live online. It depends on what connections we have with potential distributors or what funding we get. Mm-hmm. Ideally, it would be like an online resource with like the different chapters and background info of the case and everything. So we wouldn't have to put all that context in the film itself, right? But I'll let you know.
I look forward to it. It's that's a crazy story.
A heavy subject.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have a role to play as a woman filmmaker, in advancing the cause of women? What drives you to tell like stories like that?
Well, I think, especially with Lupita, I think I'm obviously drawn to stories of justice and injustice and uplifting women's voices, but I think especially, Lupita says herself, like, indigenous women or women of color are the women who have buried this weight in history of the world, right? So I think that's where I've decided to start, and it's like very overlooked. I'm also trying to figure out how to make it more of a collaboration, like I said. So if it were to be a feature film, like how would Lupita interview or direct like her larger search, right?
Yeah.
I haven't hashed that one out more, but I think that's just, it's a good question.
It is an interesting perspective.
Women, especially indigenous women, have like carried the heaviest weight in history, especially in the Americas. So.
And there's so much that we still don't know, so much history that we don't know that remains buried, so many issues that are completely ignored and brushed aside.
Hidden.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to your work coming out and to seeing it. I would love to see this story. I come from a place where in Dominica we have the Kalinago community, and the Kalinagos, they came from South America and they inhabited the islands before the Europeans came, and they were eradicated like all through the Caribbean. So Dominica is basically the only island that still has a population of Kalinago. And, they are still over 3,000 individuals, so there's a good reasonably sized population, because Dominica's population is just about 70,000. It's not a huge population either. But I'm so proud of that heritage that we have. I feel that we have, 500 or more years of history right there presently, and we have retained something that all the other islands they lost, thanks to the topography of Dominica, which is very mountainous, and the extreme fighting spirit of the Kalinago, and their resilience. But I also know that there's so many stories that to be told. There's so many things that this community has gone through and they've lived, that they've been discriminated against and they've been stigmatized, and their experiences and their issues have in the past always been played down and placed, they've been like second-class citizens, and, they've had to fight extremely hard, like the Native Americans, for example, or the indigenous people in certain areas of South America or Central America, to gain the rights of first-class citizens, as like anybody else in their country. So I'm very sensitive to the questions of the indigenous people, because I know that we owe them so much, and they're very unjustly subject to neglect and ill treatment and discrimination. And I know that we, in the same way that we demand rights for example, for women, for Black people, etc., that we have to demand rights, that justice be done for our indigenous people, because if they had not been there at first, we wouldn't have been here, In the case of the Caribbean islands, for example, and Dominica, the Kalinago, they harbored a lot of maroon slaves, a lot of runaway slaves from neighboring islands. So they were key to creating history in Dominica. They were part of the resistance and part of the movement and part of building a resilient nation. So we owe them so much. So that's why one of the reasons why I'm really touched by these stories, and I'm so, I anticipate them coming out and them, raising awareness also with the general public, especially when they're stories that you don't see in mainstream media, and they're not stories that are just about like folklore, or they don't present this exotic picture of people, they tell their real stories without victimizing them or sensationalizing things.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that is a relatively new conversation too.
Yeah, definitely.
You should make a film investigating that. Let me know.
Oh yes, it's actually an idea that I've had already, that we've had and that we've spoken about. And so there's so many things that we need to do, and there's so many stories to explore, but it's definitely one of the stories that I've been wanting to tell for a while now. And I actually got on board a project last year, and we submitted funding for the project. So it was, I can't go into detail about it, but we would have worked with the Kalinago community in some form. So it's, because of COVID, it's on pause right now. So we have to resubmit at some point, like later this year. So I'm really looking forward to that coming through, and then sometime in 2021 that we can, tell that story. Yeah, definitely.
Keep me posted.
Okay, I will. Well, Monica, it was like so nice talking with you. Thank you for sharing all those stories with me. Those are amazing stories.
They're It's usually so hard for me. That was a great conversation.
Oh,
Thanks.
I'm really happy. Thank you so much. It was great for me too. You touched on so many things that near and dear to my heart. Um, and I know that there are also things that you spoke about that can definitely be like a takeaway for also people who are just getting into film, or even persons who may already be, they're already filmmakers, but you're sometimes struggling with maybe finding funding, or getting their work distributed, or, dealing with difficult stories like the ones that you spoke about. Just having some pointers on building resources and the importance. I cannot stress that enough, the importance of building a network, because I know that when I started out, I did not understand just how much it was important to build a network. I really felt like indie filmmaker meant independent, means that you're basically a bit like on your own. And I think maybe as somebody who was coming from doing a PhD, I had been on my own for like 5 years, just like, swimming in open waters. So I just, kept on going. And with my partner in film there, Stephanie, who's the director at Creators on Films, we were just, swimming on our own until we realized that your network that you create around you, it's not just about professionals in the field. It's really about people and building a human connection with people, people who are gonna support you, and they're gonna support you in all types of ways. They're going to, when you put out something, they're going to be like, hey, yes, I want to see it. There may be people who are not interested in your film, but I do want to see it, and I'm going to share your stuff because I support you, and I'm not your competition just because I'm also a filmmaker. Your partner, I know what you live in, and we're standing shoulder to shoulder, so we're stronger together. And I'm going to share resources with you, and when there are job opportunities, I'm going to share it with you also. And you mentioned Brown Girls Doc Mafia. That's like an amazing group of women, of brown women, who just came together to do that, support each other, create opportunities, and definitely not wait for things to come to them, but they decided we're gonna like take a stand together. And now this community is over 4,000 strong, and I'm really happy to see it growing, and I'm happy to be a part of it, because I can feel the support and the love that these women share among themselves. So if anybody's listening to us right now, and like you're a woman filmmaker, this is definitely either you can be part of this group if you're a brown filmmaker, or you can support this group as an ally. It's absolutely an amazing network to be a part of here. So I just wanted to say,
a future, right?
Yes, definitely. Looking forward.
Thanks for that future to come.
So thank you so much for being with me, for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to see Lupita when it comes out.